We started talking about David, and we talked about how the idea was that we were to be just simply trusting in God, and that meant that we had to let go. Uh, it means that we have to let go of our lives. We have to be willing to go wherever God wants us to go and to do what God would have us to do. And that requires faith. That requires a leap of faith. I've been kind of really just kind of focusing in on this here lately. I've been talking where I used to teach at. I've been talking to these students for their spiritual emphasis week, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the need to be bold for their faith and we were talking about the paralytic. A story in the Bible um, about these friends. They want to see Jesus healed, or they want to see their paralytic friend healed. And so they're trying to get to Jesus. He's in Capernaum, and it's just crowded. And he's trying to get to they're trying to get to Jesus, trying to get their friend to have this encounter with Jesus, because they're believing that if their paralytic friend meets Jesus, he's going to be healed. And they couldn't get in because the room was crowded. And so their brilliant idea was, let's just go through the roof. And that was a big fear. That was a big step of faith. And I'm sure that they were afraid of what others might think, of what people might say, that sort of thing. And the idea of, what if I fall through the roof? Right. And in fact, I said that. I talked about it. I was like, what if they thought, like, what if we do the wrong thing and it just collapses? And even the paralytic himself had to have some sort of faith, if you think about it, because like he was trusting his friends that they could do this and not cause more damage, and that he was willing to do whatever it took for him to see Jesus. That's a bold faith, and that's just taking a leap. And sometimes we get afraid to do that. And so, we talked about that, about needing to let go of your life and to trust God with your life. We talked about how a lot of times it's not necessarily the fear that prevents us from following after God. It's about our past. We talked about that, and we spent a couple weeks kind of actually looking at that and talking about how we can give God our past, and that God can use us despite what our past was. Like we talked about Paul. If any dude's got a past, it's that guy right there. He persecuted believers, and then he became a believer. And so I'm sure he had to deal with that as well. It just, and the other thing too is that as we go and as we do things, as we're feeling, if how we live our faith, it has a ripple effect for others. Did you ever think about that? Like how you live your faith has a ripple effect. There's this passage in Philippians 1:6 that says, and I talked a little bit about it, and we might circle around to it, but we talked a little bit about how, like, God who began a good work in you will see it through until completion. And he says, he doesn't say at the end of it, he doesn't say until the day you die. He says until the day of Christ Jesus' return. That means that we will leave a legacy for other people. And there are people that are just desperate to see, believers. There are believers that are desperate to see other believers live out their faith. Live out their faith in a good and wonderful and holy way. The world, there are lost people that are longing for people who are claimed to be Jesus followers, Jesus lovers. They are wanting you to show what it means to be a follower of Jesus. The world's got their own idea about it. They think we're crazies. They think we're angry all the time. They think that we're self-righteous. They think we're judgmental. And they want to have anything to do with us. The world needs for us to show them. Your world needs you to show them what it means to follow Jesus and what does that look like. It's kind of led us to talk about this because one of the things that really matters is being together as a group of believers. A lot of times when I've preached this passage before, I've always talked about it in terms of church. Like, the passage we're going to look at, it talks about church. In fact, let's dive into it. It's in Hebrews. Hebrews is we don't know who wrote Hebrews, by the way. We don't know who it was, Paul, if it was somebody else. We have no idea because no one says their name in it. The writer doesn't say, I, Paul, or I, Bill, or I, Frankie. Nobody says that. They don't say, I, Logan. That would be weird. But anyway, you're like, Logan, you wrote that book? But he didn't. No, you did not. You weren't even around. And they didn't have computers back then, so, not to throw shade at you, you probably wouldn't have touched it. But you've been like, no, writing, forget it. No, just kidding. I'm just teasing with you. But we don't know who wrote Hebrews. There's a lot of people feel like it's Paul because it sounds just like Paul. Some of the things it says, like therefore, now, and that's usually what Paul says. But we don't really know. But it matters how we live in community. When it comes to church, when it comes to youth group right here, which is part of church, but even with our friends. We're going to dive in and talk about that, how you are meant to belong and to be part of a good and godly group. Like I said, in the book of Hebrews, we learn about what it means to show our faith, what it means to step out in our faith. You have Hebrews chapter 11, which is before our chapter tonight. The Hebrews chapter 11 is like known as the Hall of Faith. Like you have all these great people that did all these amazing things, like Abel and Moses and all the people throughout who we read about in the Old Testament, how they stepped out in faith, how they trusted God, all of these things. Hebrews 12, for a while as a runner, I used to hold to, it just went blank. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And, but in Hebrews chapter 11, you have this amazing faith, these amazing people of faith. But then for our passage in Hebrews 10, he starts out the chapter by talking about how Jesus is our perfect sacrifice. He talks about because of Jesus, we no longer have to worry about, making a sacrifice. Back in the day, they would have to sacrifice a bull or a ram or a lamb or something like that. And it had to be unblemished, and they had to present it at to the priest, and the priest would have to inspect it. And then, if it was found to be pure and unblemished, they would slaughter it. They would offer, especially the lamb, they will offer it up as a sacrifice. And from there, the priest could then go in, and back in the temple, you had the Holy of Holies, and then you had the Most Holy Place. And in the Most Holy Place was where God was. And what separated the two different rooms was this curtain. Only the high priest could go in and approach God. If anybody else would do that, they would be vaporized like that. No kidding. They would be destroyed, wiped out. They would be melted. They would be gone. Okay? That was the rule that God had set forth. And so, even what they would do when the day that the high priest was allowed to go in, what they would do is they would tie a rope and a bell around him, around his ankle. Do you know why they would do that? Well, that, and also if he was alive, he would move his leg. Felt it pulling. If they moved his leg, they knew he was alive. But if they didn't, because they couldn't go in, they just drag him out. Can you imagine? You're there, you went in there on the false pretenses. God's like, I'm done with you, dead, and they're pulling on you. And You're just not moving, and so like getting dragged out of this one area. Really weird. Okay. Well, when Jesus dies, when he dies on the cross, right? I mean, think about how scary that would be. Like you'd be on your best behavior, right? But when Jesus dies, he rips that the curtain is torn in two. And because of Jesus' sacrifice, we don't have to go through a go-between of a priest, that we have someone who is in heaven mediating on our behalf, and that is Jesus. And because of that, we have direct access to God. And that's what the writer of Hebrews is getting at. And he's talking about how all this has changed. And here's the deal. He says, look, in light of all this, in light of everything, this is how you should live. This is how you should live. You should be living this godly way. And he goes on and he's talking about this. And because of Christ's sacrifice, we got this direct access, and that we're to do this boldly together. Together. That's probably a word you're going to hear a lot about tonight. It's together. And what it means to be godly together. What does it mean for us to be together? And this is what it says in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 through 25. It says, let us hold on to the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another in order to provoke love and good works, and not neglecting to gather together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. There are some things I want us to gather here. There's some things, if you're writing notes, if you're a note taker, first thing is that we are called to hold fast to hope. We're called to hold fast to hope. This is what he said in 10:23 of Hebrews. He says, let us hold on to the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. What do you notice about the first part of that verse? What do you notice about it? He's saying take a leap of faith. You'll be okay. Okay. Not that he'll be faithful back if you're faithful, but you should be faithful because he is faithful. There's that. But what else? What do you see in the very first part of that? Notice that he doesn't say, you hold on to the confession of our hope. He doesn't say that, does he? What does he say? Let us. Our world is very self-focused. From commercials to music to everything, there's like this unhealthy focus on self, how it's all about you. But with our faith, we're not meant to go it alone. The writer is saying this for a reason and for a purpose. Yeah, in a sense, he's addressing a group of believers, and that's why he would say, "Let us." But think about this. He's including himself in this. Like Paul, when he would write to someone, "You need to do this. This is what you need to do." When he's writing to a group of believers, he would say, "This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You need to do this. You all need to do this, brothers and sisters. This is what needs to happen." This writer is saying, let us, as if he's talking to a community, because he is. We're not meant to do faith alone. We're not meant to live our lives alone. We're not meant to do that. We're meant to do it in community. You and I, if we're followers of Christ, to do life, that's what we're called to do life together in community. You and me, we're called to do life together in community. That's why he says, let us. Because you and I, as believers, we need each other. I need you and you need me. We need one another. We, of course, strengthen our faith through prayer, through study, through worship, through those things. But we also strengthen our faith by being community together, by sharing each other's burdens, by praying for each other. We're just not meant to do life alone. And for some reason, we think we can do our faith alone. But the reality of it is that we need to do faith together. He says, let us do this. There's a great strength and encouragement that happens when we do life together. That doesn't mean that we should all of a sudden like move in together. Not that. We're not talking about that. But as we go about as believers, we are to find other believers and be in community with them. You know, it matters. It matters for our growth. It matters for to help us understand our faith better. You know, and so for some of you, maybe like, I'm pretty much a loner and this is weird. And I get that. I understand that. But the reality of it is you're not going to grow as much as what you would do as if you grow together in community. There is the growth of you as an individual. Yes, you as a believer, you need to work out your salvation. You need to strengthen yourself as a believer by prayer, by doing all these things. And one of the things that God calls us to do is to get together, is to meet together, to pray together, to lift each other up. Like you think about this, even like in the Old Testament, when he pulls the Israelites out of Egypt, he doesn't pull them one at a time, does he? Pulls them together as a community. And when he dwells with us, when he dwells, like when we read about in the book of Exodus about how, we learned, not read because it's in Numbers, but we learned about how when God wants the tabernacle set up, he wants it set up in the middle of the tribes, all gathered together. God is all about community, and he calls us to live in community. One of the amazing things is that we get to do faith together. That you and I get to live faith together, get to share and to grow and to pray for each other. You know, we get to serve a God who loves us together because of what Jesus did. We get to celebrate that together. We get to rejoice in the fact that, as the rest of that passage said, let us hold on with the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. We get to celebrate that together. So we're to hold fast to hope, and we're to do that together. We're also to have heartfelt encouragement. Maybe a better way of saying it is we need to have godly encouragement in our lives. This is what it says in Hebrews 10:24. It says this. It says that let us consider one another in order to provoke love and good works. Now think about this for a minute. We're talking about being in a community. And a big part of that here in this passage is talking about us community believers living together, following together, worshiping together. But also it means in our own small groups, like our own friend groups. When we're following God together in community, it just inspires us. To be more Christ-like in our actions and our obedience. We're called to support each other. I think we can all agree with that, right? We're all called to support each other. Yes? Yes? That's what we're supposed to do. You might be like, we're pretty good. Our youth group's pretty good, pretty strong. Church is getting stronger. Some things are going on. But let me narrow this down. It matters who your friends are. I want you to listen to me on this. It matters who your friends are. No, I'm not just talking about like you have friends that are druggies, they'll make you a drug. I'm not saying that. Although it's probably that will happen. If you have friends, so don't have friends that are druggies, okay? All right? Please don't have friends that are druggies, okay? All right, but some of you have friends in your friend groups. Maybe it's a lot of your friend group. You need to think about this. Are they good, godly friendships? Or are they type that tears you down, tears people down, it talks trash about others, it says things or does things that are not okay. You have a friend group that gossips, spreads rumors. Because friendship with other believers is also a part of being in community. What I've learned is that, like, it's so much easier to go with the crowd than it is to try to have the crowd go with you. And if you have a friend group that is really not a good friend group, that's not a godly friend group, it's going to cause problems for you in your own walk. Friends that you hang around with are not good friends, you might need to think about what you're doing. Not necessarily saying you need to stop talking to them, but maybe you need to start hanging around some godlier friends. Maybe you need to be praying for that friend that isn't godly, that they come to know Jesus. This is what Paul says about the need to have good friendships, good godly friendships, or good godly relationships. He says that in 1 Corinthians 15:33, it says, "Do not be conceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." A good community of other believers will inspire. A good friendship filled with other believers will help you be a better believer. Good godly friendships will help you grow in your faith, lifting you up, not tearing you down. That's why the writer in Hebrews says, let us consider each other to provoke love in good works. So if your friend group is not promoting love, is not doing the things that God would have you to do, you might need to think about your friendships. It matters the type of community that you run yourself in with. Your friends, the type of friends that you have, matter. That's why in Proverbs 27:17 it says, iron sharpens iron and one person sharpens another. Because as you know, what we think about this in your Sunday school classes, in our discipleship time, even out here in our summer Bible studies that we do, which we will do another summer Bible study, there's that engagement with each other that we can help each other up. Think about the conversations like with your good Christian friends that you have, or your good Christian special friends that you have. And you talk about like things of faith. You talk about like you have those conversations. At least I hope you do. I mean, if you got a best friend, I hope you have those conversations about Jesus, about God at some point, in some way, in some shape, in some form. If you haven't, you probably need to think about talking to your friend about this. But it matters. It helps us to grow stronger together. It helps us to grow deeper in our faith. If I am coming to church here, and I love coming to church here, being here, worshiping, all that, and then I go and hang out with my friends that do all kinds of terrible things, do all kinds of horrible things, act in ways that are not good. And I'm not necessarily saying that they go and rob somebody's house. Don't be a friend if they rob somebody's house. That's not cool. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't help us in our walk if we're coming here and acting like we loving Jesus, all this, and then we go and we act completely different. You need to have good, godly friends. That matters. Your friendships should be lifting you up. If it's not, you might need to make some changes. And then finally, there's the need for gathering together. In Hebrews 10:25, it says this. It says, Not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other all the more as you see the day approaching. Like I've been saying tonight, good friendships matter just like being in community, in a community of faith. We need to be lifting each other up, not created to do life alone. We're not called to do life alone. And for some of you, you might just have been alone your whole life. So this is a weird thing for you. And it might be hard to adjust, and you're going to have to learn to do some things, learn to compromise, learn that you're not going to be the same, that they're not always going to be like you, and you're not always going to be like them, that there are differences. You know? That's how relationships are. You don't want an exact duplicate of you. You might think you do, but the reality is you don't. So if you're like, oh, it's just me, you need to reach out, because we're not meant to do faith alone. And as great as what we get to do, the things that we get to do in here, the stuff that we get to do, the worship, the word, it fails in comparison to living out your daily life of faith together in community. I've got friends, or youth pastor friends, and I'm grateful that I have them in my life because they have helped me through friendship, through prayer, help me grow. It matters the type of friends that we have. He says, not neglecting to gather together. What was happening back then is that because you might, well, what does all this have to do? What is all this? Well, what was happening back then is that Christians, because of so much persecution that was going on, they were hiding, or they just stopped meeting together. We're not called to do that. And so the writer is saying, hey, don't do this. You need to be doing these other things, holding on to hope, provoking one another to love and good works. He says this is the reason why. Because Jesus is going to come back. And the world needs to see how you live out your faith. The same is true with us. We don't know when Jesus is coming back, but we do know it's closer today than it was yesterday. And you've got friends, you've got people that you know that don't know who Jesus is. That they've never accepted Jesus. Maybe because, like I said earlier, it's because they looked at Christians and they think they're nothing but crazy weirdos. How you live your life as a believer with your friends matters. Because the world is watching how we interact. If they see us talking bad with our buddies about someone, if they see us doing things that are wrong, and what are they going to think? They're going to think this is what Christianity is, saying one thing and doing another. No, thank you. It matters. Your world is watching you. You need to be in a good, godly community with other friends. The big takeaway, if you don't get anything else tonight, if you don't get anything else, I want you to get this, that being a part of a community provides strength, it provides encouragement, it provides accountability that helps each other live out their faith boldly and joyfully. So you need to think about how your friend groups are. Maybe you do have, they're all believers, but we're all imperfect. Maybe what you need to do is have a conversation with your buddies and say, hey, we've got to be more focused on faith than what we are. We got to be more outspoken with our faith. Maybe for you, you're a believer, but some of your friends don't know it. But the world is watching. They just are. And us being together as a youth group, being together as a church, it matters to us. This matters. I think sometimes we also think that, well, it's no big deal. It's just church. It shouldn't be the mindset that we have. It shouldn't be the mindset that any of us have. What we do here is, it matters. This is where we as a group of believers approach God. So this matters. So maybe for us, maybe we've got to rethink our mindset about church as well. It's not something we have to do, or something that, well, our family is making us do. You got to look at it more so this is something we get to do. Because we get to help each other out. We get to encourage each other. We get to lift each other up. We get to grow together. I want to encourage you. Make church a priority, yeah. Even more so, even, with what we've talked about. Look at your friends. And ask yourself, are my friends helping me grow in my faith? Am I helping my friends grow in their faith? Am I provoking them to love and good works? Am I encouraging them to focus in on God? Are they doing that with me? Or are we just going through the motions and we're actually doing the direct opposite? That's something for you to think about and decide with your friendships. But we can't expect, like, our schools to change. We can't expect our world to change if we're unwilling to change ourselves. We can't expect things to get better if we're unwilling to step out and to do things, God leading us to do things that will help enact things that we know need to happen. So the challenge for you is to take a long look at your friendships. Are they good, godly friendships? Are you part of a good, godly community of friends? Or do there need to be changes? Something for you to think about this week. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for all that you've done, Lord. I pray that you just be with us as we go throughout the week. Father, help us to think about that. Help us to look at our friends. Lord, if our friends aren't lifting us up, if we're not lifting each other up, Father, I pray that we make the changes that we need to make so that you are honored and glorified, so that we can grow, so that the world can see what it means to be a follower of Christ. Lord, I pray that you give us opportunities to do this week, to shine our faith, to share you in some way, shape, or form. It's in your name I pray. Amen. It's 8 o'clock. Y'all are dismissed. Don't forget, camp will open up February 1st, camp registration. We're going to be doing, we'll probably do the Saints thing that we did last year. My goal is not to go to the hospital like I did last year. So y'all have a good rest of your week.